Hey everybody, welcome to the Road to Real Estate podcast with John and Lauren.
Hey guys.
Got a nice good one for you guys today. We're going to do the top 10 home inspection red flags. But before we get into it, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out our title screen.
Welcome to the Road to Real Estate podcast, where John and Lauren help you grow your real estate business. Enjoy the show.
All right, so our first topic is going to be, I think, foundations and structures and common issues with those that we should keep an eye out. What do you got for us on that, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first place that you look. This is one of the largest things to have fixed in a home typically. You need to be smart about it. Different areas experience different structural issues and foundation issues. Here in Georgia, we run into things because there's basements and we build on hills. And that is the structural issues that we typically see, is that some settling of the house. There are some cracks that are normal and typical. There is settling that is just completely normal, but there are things that are red flags. And so what you specifically want to look for are uneven floors that don't come together. Like the cracks that, if you have a crack that is like uneven or a floor that is uneven, that's
Actually shifting or settling away from each other?
Yes, yeah, they don't come back together. That's a problem. Even in garages, we see a lot of, just minor cracks in cement floors in the garage or in the basement, or rarely do you get to see your slab if you're built on a slab. If you're not in new construction. So there are hairline cracks that we would consider to be very typical, not a big deal. So we're not talking about every time you see a crack in cement as a foundation problem. If it looks bigger. My husband, who is a civil engineer and knows a lot about building, he always says, could you put a penny in it?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can put a penny in it, it's something you want to look into more. It doesn't mean there's something bad, but you want to look into it more.
Yeah.
And so this is a really important repair because it's not something that the general public can diagnose really well on their own, right? I mean, I don't always know if something is structural. And so this is a really good moment to stop and say, hey, get an inspector. Have somebody professionally look at this, because they're going to see things in a different way. You're looking at the layout of the floor, the paint, the windows, the lighting. They're going to look at the structure of the house. And so the first thing is definitely this foundation and structural issues. Some of the indicators, if you're like viewing a home, would be cracks in the sheetrock as well as the house settles around doorways and windows, or you start to see cracks in the sheetrock. And so when you look at those cracks, there's certain ones that are normal. Like if it goes along the line of like a sheetrock, like sheetrock. Yeah, a sheetrock is put on in pieces, or and normally attached to, like you said, a beam. And so if it makes sense, that's like, oh, this goes along. Like, okay, that wasn't taped well, that wasn't mud well. That's not a foundation issue. But you want to be real careful when you see stair step cracks along brick or cinder block, as well as if you see them along a doorway and then you see them again somewhere else above that doorway. And so you just want to be aware of it. Settling is normal, nail pops are normal, but this type of thing you want to look a little bit closer.
Yeah. You briefly touched on cinder blocks. That's something that, because we have basements here, as they settle, you can see that they crack along the way as the pressure of that ground and the water through years and years of rain coming up against the side of the block. It's usually on the hillside of the home where that becomes an issue. Any of that stuff, if you can see it yourself, you want to actually point it out to your inspector, and then they will look at it and go, hey, you might want to bring a structural engineer in here. You might want to bring someone in that's a little bit versed in just foundations to go a little deeper before you proceed forward on your house. I guess it's important to note before we get too far down this list that any one of these red flags doesn't mean buy a house or don't buy a house. Every individual is going to be different with what they feel like they can handle or undertake when they purchase a property. So all these red flags, if this happens to you, that doesn't mean buy the home or don't buy the home, but we just want you to be aware of these things as you're going through the process of buying a home. They're like, hey, maybe we get a little bit more information on this. It may be nothing to you. If you're super handy, you might look at this and go, oh, that's nothing. I can fix that myself. If you're not, it might be a deal breaker for you. So just because we're saying there are 10 red flags doesn't mean yes or no. When we're wrong, if you got 3 or 4 of these on this list, I would think pretty strongly about it. But it's one of those things that everyone's got a different capability. So don't take it in a way of, hey, don't buy these houses because this happened. It's up to you. It's your decision. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you can undertake is up to you as an individual.
Yeah, a great example of that when I very first started selling real estate. It was kind of ironic. I had a family moving here to Georgia from Texas, and where they lived in Texas, foundation issues were very, very common because they have like the sand effect, where I guess the ground can shift a lot more, and so they were very, very, very used to fixing foundation issues. Every house had a foundation issue. They just knew how to repair it. We looked at a house. This house was totally out of their budget. They could not have afforded to live in this neighborhood, but there was a foundation issue. The foundation issue was super easy to fix, but because in Georgia that's not common like it was in Texas, it scared all the buyers away. So this cute little couple was able to buy this house for $100,000 less than anything else in the neighborhood because everybody was afraid of this foundation repair. They bought the house, they repaired the foundation, lived happily ever after, right? Really, really, really made a great deal of money on that property because they took that risk. So to your point, red flags are kind of like a yield sign, not a stop sign, right?
Yeah, of course. Every one of these.
Proceed with caution.
Every one of these is proceed with caution. That's for sure.
And while we're putting little asterisks on this topic, I'll also say, when we talk about like hiring a structural engineer, we also talk about how that your inspector is your jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And it's really important that you have that structural engineer, that if you need something extra, but you need to understand that inspector will not be able to tell you everything about everything. They will be able to tell you about the house and let you know if it needs more attention, but they're not always going to be the expert. Even something like an HVAC, they're going to take it apart, they're going to look at it, they're going to tell you. But if you need more repair, they're going to request a professional or somebody who specializes in that. So just keep in mind that inspector knows a lot about a lot of things, but he doesn't go super deep on any one thing. And so keep that in mind. Yeah. When you're thinking about your inspector, that if you get your inspection report and you're like, why does he say I need a structural engineer and a HVAC and a roof? Because they're good at identifying the problems, but they don't always give you the solutions for how to fix it. And that's not really in their job description.
Something needing a roof, they might say, hey, you have roof issues, and they could come in there and you get a roof inspection separate and like, well, if you replace this section, well, that replacing a small section could be as little as $1,000 versus a whole roof, which is $15,000. So there's a huge price swing. Just because your roof has red flags doesn't mean everything needs to go. You can do sectional repairs at a lower price. Obviously, if your shingles are worn out and you need to replace all your shingles, then you're going to go through the whole. They'll re-shingle too. I think they re-shingle twice before they recommend going through and replacing all the wood as well. So all that stuff is there's layers to everything. So something that may be serious might actually not be that serious in terms of cost to repair. Some stuff is easier than others depending on the amount of damage. So any one of these things that comes up, getting a specialist in that field is going to definitely give you a lot more breathing room. I'll say it may, like I said, it might be something we just talked about, roof, which is our number 2. It could, like I said, the price vary is enough that it might be like, hey, this is nothing, let's go forward. It could be this is a deal breaker, or something you can negotiate with the seller of the home, or if you're the seller, something you want to do before you hit it in the market because you don't want to lower your price that much, and the cost of repair might be cheaper than it's going to cost you during a negotiation on a contract. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so, and I think you teed us right up, like you said, for number 2, roof damage, right? I mean, roof damage, it's huge, I think, no matter where you live. If you're in colder states, I think ice and snow and things can affect your roof. If you're in the warmer states, I think you have things like hurricanes and wind and all sorts of things. And you would expect different roofing conditions in different areas, but it is an issue for everyone. So things that you want to look for is curled shingles. One of the things the professionals look for is how much granular grains are still left on it. For us as laymen, it's kind of like, okay, do the shingles look old? A lot of times, if they are faded, even though the color doesn't make a difference, it tells you what has happened to the shingles. For us, where we are in our world at this moment, if I see 3-tab shingles, which are like those really flat-lying shingles, I think, this is an older roof. Whereas if I see the architectural, it could go either way because those are 20 years old at this point. We started those in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So just being smart, looking when you're inside the home, even during your first walkthroughs as a real estate professional, I'm looking at the ceiling, trying to see if I see any marks, any things, any indications that there could be a leak or a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then flashing. Flashing is not something that I think most buyers are looking at, but I think agents do. And our rules and laws in Georgia have changed a lot about flashing. So you want to make sure that there is flashing over doors, windows, between the house and the deck is a really, 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 really big one that was not code until past 10 years.
Yeah. Recently.
It's like 50-50 on a lot of houses if we see it or not. But that flashing is just a little tiny little piece of metal, and it does so much for keeping water out of the house.
One of the things on there as well is I look for sagging between the rafters. You can see when that wood starts to settle and you get that little bow, and you can look at older roofs and you can see it kind of just has this flow to it. That means you're not looking at just shingles. You're starting to think, well, it's time to replace the wood underneath the shingles as well. Obviously, once you go replacing the wood as well, things are going to go up price-wise in terms on that roof. Missing shingles is another one. A couple of bad storms, shingles can tear. Debris hitting the top of the roof can tear up some shingles. So if you're looking up there and you can see some blank spots where the pattern is irregular because they've taken some damage over the years, those are good signs. So when you start tearing and missing shingles, the next step is going to be leaks. That's how it works.
Yeah, and sometimes the leaks have nothing to do with the shingles at all. The shingles are still in really great condition, but the boots, which are
around
the stacks, the things coming out. Yeah, anything coming out of the chimney has a rubber boot or that has tar and other things around it in order to seal up that opening. A lot of times that rubber just dry rots. I mean, especially in different environments that get hot, cold, or stay cold, the dry rot is really, really high for that. So there's a lot of different things that could go wrong in a roof, but I'm really going to emphasize here, this is when you really need to lean into your inspector, lean into your real estate agent, try to figure out exactly who a good professional is. Because I heard it just this week, Jonathan, that there are predatory roofing companies.
Oh, yeah.
And what I mean when I say that is that there was so much hail damage in the past 10 years in Georgia, I'm sure other places as well, that we have people at least once a week coming by our houses and saying, you had hail in the area. We just had it 2 weeks ago. So we've been having a lot of the guys recently. There's hail in your area. We can get your roof replaced for free. And old Bubba gets on the roof and he damages something. So you didn't have a problem and now you do. And like I said, I heard it yesterday talking with a group of friends. I heard somebody tell a horror story about this. I've had it happen to my own roof. I've had it happen to clients' roofs. Do not just go with the cheapest or go with somebody you just find off the internet or go with somebody who just sticks a card in your door. If you are looking for a roofing specialist, get a recommendation from someone. Your real estate agent, your inspector, word of mouth, find somebody who can vouch for them because there are so many small roofing companies that don't really do a good job.
Yeah, I will say in the last couple of weeks, my phone gets people like, hey, we're in the area. I just want to let you know we can check your roof while we're there because we're doing your neighbor. Like, leave my roof alone. You're not welcome up there. I will get somebody when the time is right,
Yeah, and insurance companies have cracked down on roofs. You are not getting roofs replaced like you did a couple years ago for anything. So if you think that you're going to be able to buy a house and have your insurance replace the roof immediately, we're seeing a lot more of that getting denied. So just be aware that this is something that you need to think about the costs. You're probably going to have to foot at least half of it, if not all of it. And so keep that in mind.
Yeah. So big things with the roof is water damage. The next topic's going to be fire damage, technically. We move on to electrical problems in the home. And I don't know if you guys know, but a little electrical issue usually turns into a fire issue. And this is a good one. Number one is your electrical panels. Be sure your electrical panels are up to date. There are a few, I don't know all the names offhand, but that were popular in the 80s that are now not covered by insurance and recommended not to have them in the home. So I wish I knew the name of all the brands that we don't use anymore. But
I don't run into as many of those brands. What I do run into is aluminum wiring. I do run into aluminum wiring with older houses, especially if there's been no problem. So aluminum was used for wiring in whole houses for a very small time in very small areas, and it was found that it's just not durable. It melts or it breaks or it falls apart. So we don't see it all the time, but when you run into it, you need to be aware because that is a whole house rewire. Non-negotiable at this point. If you still have aluminum in a house, it is only time before it fails, and so that needs to be definitely addressed. And the other thing I see is that sometimes if somebody has not moved out of a house or had a lot of repairs done on a house, the house is not grounded. And so this has changed. Whereas if you went to, your grandparents' house, you used to be able to ground the house by just attaching the grounding to the water line, right? A metal water line. But nowadays that is no longer acceptable. They do want true grounding rods in the ground. And that may not mean a lot to you guys personally, but it's really important for your house and for the electricity and for the safety of your family, whatever that looks like in the house.
Oh yeah, I've got multiple grounding rods in this house. Yeah, we had extra put in because I do powder coating for fun, and they need to be really close to the ground. So we put grounding stakes out by the shop. We put more. Our house is grounded, which is good.
You're very well. Jonathan's very, very well grounded.
Well grounded. Even I am without the house. Grounded personality.
A lot of therapy took you to get there. I have a family member, and they had a very nice house, very high end, in a very nice neighborhood. Ironically, he was the builder, and this house was struck by lightning, like the house, like lost appliances, like the house was struck by lightning 3 times. Now they did live in Florida, so there were a higher number of lightning storms, right? However, there was a problem with the grounding. Even though it was technically done, it could have been done better, to your point. And so that's something that, as a homeowner, you don't think about the grounding of your house. That is not a regular thought you have, but it is really important when you're looking for buying or selling a house.
Yeah, I will say I recently sold a house literally, 2 weeks ago now, and had the most impressive electrical panel I've ever seen. It had the whole home surge protector. Every single switch was GFI for the entire home, the whole panel. And it was like you open the door, it's like, it was just nice to look at. I know it's a weird thing, but when I opened it up, I'm like, wow, that's way better than my electrical panel.
Your little panel going on there.
50-year difference, in terms of when they went in, but the technology and the stuff, the way they're wired is so much better than what most homes are, even if you go back 20 years. The technology in that side of things has really come a very big difference, and that's not a cheap thing to redo. If you have the right wiring and you're just replacing the box and the panel, it's still a lot of work. So just want to be mindful of. It's not an emergency thing if you have a little bit older panel, but as long as your wiring is good, and even then to check your outlets, your inspector will do that to make sure you have GFI in your kitchen and your bathroom.
Yeah. Let's define GFI. What does GFI mean?
Basically, if the outlet gets wet, it's going to trip the breaker.
Yeah, it's a ground fault interrupter, right? And so,
actual words,
people like to know the words, right? Or some people say GFCI, ground fault circuit interrupter, and the idea is that that it can be one GFI, or it can be a GFI with several outlets connected to it, and if at any point there's a disruption in the electricity, which could be water, it could be a surge, it could be anything that happens to throw it off, all of those outlets shut down, and that helps to eliminate electrocution. Now, I don't know if you're looking from if you're watching us from somewhere else in the world. Here in America, we have 2 different types of outlet. We have a 220, and we also have the 120, and so we have 2 different ones. If you go to other places in the world, some of them only have the big outlets, so we have less of an electrocution risk with our smaller outlets, but that's important to know. that if you're moving here, we do have smaller outlets.
The older GFI usually has a little button on it that you can push to reset the breaker from the outlet. The newer ones, like the ones we just put in the kitchen, just have a little tiny green LED in the corner of them, and that's it. Like it's a whole different ball game. So there's not one good way to do it. Obviously, the older ones are easier to identify, but that's something your inspector will know. They will test the outlet. I guess we'll go right on to plumbing, unless there's something else you want to hit on.
No, I think we did it, and I think this is one that's, if you don't with electrical, if you don't have a big major issue, it's easy to update as you go, right?
Yeah.
This would be something that if you do hit a red flag, you need to really investigate it. But if you hit some yellow flags, typically those
probably
can
more
be
common
very easily. So I think that just rank the problem.
If you got
a GFI or something like that can be installed fairly easily by an electrician or some handyman.
A bad outlet here and there is $3 at Home Depot. That's not going to break the bank. So if someone goes, "Hey, you need a GFI in here," it's a $20 outlet for a GFI, and you can get a fancy one with a USB cable plug in it, and never worry about it again. It's 10 minutes of work. I'm not telling you to do it yourself. If you don't know how to do it, get a professional. But it's one of those things, like, don't be worried on an outlet situation in your house. They can be replaced for next to nothing. But when it comes to the actual wiring and electrical panel, those are much bigger, more serious complications. I'll say it that way. Next up is plumbing.
Plumbing issues, yeah.
And we've all had plumbing issues. The very first house I bought had Lauren's favorite piping in it.
Polybutylene.
Yeah, so we had polybutylene in the first house, so we had random leaks all the time, which required us to cut open a lot of walls. We've talked about it in past podcasts. For the most part, I would think at this point, if it was going to fail, it's already failed. It's been 40 years, right? Because polybutylene was the 80s. So
we still saw a little bit in the 90s, but yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, it failed pretty fast and got out of there. So if you go into a house and you're looking at a house, it is like a very specific color of gray piping. Yeah. It looks like a zombie or something. It's kind of like a zombie gray. It is not an attractive color. It looks very specific.
And you see it, it's
Google
not the price either.
Yeah, and so they actually have companies that will come in and replace all the polybutylene, do all the sheetrock, and do it in one fatal go. So one thing that I would tell you is if you do see polybutylene, you can get it repaired. You just need to know how much it's going to cost and have the information to empower you on how to do it. So just like with our red flag, yellow flag before, yeah, maybe you can get a great deal on a house and use this as a negotiation tool.
Yeah. I don't see this as one there. And of course everyone's different. But if you've lived in a house that's had polybutylene the whole time and you've had no issues, you're not likely to go in and tear it out just because you're going to sell the home. But it may affect the sale of the home. It might be negotiated. It could be an issue. Some people might look at it and go, "Hey, it's already been 40 years and it hasn't broken yet. It's not going to." And they'll roll those dice. But everyone's going to be different. But I will say it's costly once those pipes break, because then you end up with a lot of moisture inside your walls and everything else. And we ended up cutting the bottom 6 inches off almost the entire house with big industrial dehumidifiers in the walls to dry everything out. It was a deal.
That was a deal. To your point, Jonathan, we sold a house, I think it was 2 years ago now, that had polybutylene in it. And the problem is, it's not that my seller had a leak. The problem was that people perceived it as needing to be replaced immediately when they walked in the door. Mm-hmm. And so it did affect the resale value because it was a stop sign for a lot of people.
Yeah. We didn't know what it was. It was never mentioned to us, and we found out the hard way,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that stinks. But I will say that water is one of the things that can ruin a home. And so even though we're talking about exactly like specific things like the roof, plumbing, other things, water is something that you're mm-hmm. going to have to manage in a home. And it's the one thing you can't sit on. Right. And so we'll go deeper into that in a minute. But
we're going to.
That's a really big one. The other thing is that most inspection companies, when you look at plumbing, are going to offer sewer scopes. Now, if you are looking at a house and it looks great and it looks fine, maybe it is, and maybe you don't need one. Mm-hmm. But I have seen two major issues, like major issues, two different sales that were saved by a sewer scope. And I will tell you that sewer scopes, they're not cheap. I typically see them from $200 to $500, and they just put a camera on a tube and they stick it down your pipes. But one of the things that we ran into, which you know probably, Jonathan, because I told you my horror story, was Orangeburg.
Yeah.
So Orangeburg is a type of pipe that was used a very long time ago. 40s, 50s, 60s, like it's 20s. You know, it was used at a time when they were trying to save on metal and looking for other options. And it is essentially like fabric and tar and resin. And that's what they were making sewer pipes out of. So let's just like
Doesn't seem
picture
like a
this.
great idea just upon mentioning it.
Yeah, I mean, let's picture this like a sewer pipe. The one thing you don't want spilling into your life or world or front yard, and you use a resin covered piece of cloth in order to get it to the. But honestly, we did not know that this was in there. We did not have the sewer scope done ahead of time. It wasn't immediately at the house. It was like 12 feet away from the house. And so because they did a very thorough sewer scope, they found it, and it was very interesting. So you guys should go and look up Orangeburg and be horrified at what they used for sewer pipes back in the day. But without a sewer scope, there's no way you would have known it, right? The other thing that sometimes happens is tree roots. Tree roots get into pipes, and because of the way the tree root works, the root gets in there, and because there's water or fertilizer, if you will, the tree puts more roots into it, and it becomes a really big problem because it's like, hey, here's a source of water, and it sends more roots.
And nutrients and everything else.
Yeah, and so it winds up becoming a much bigger problem. So inside the house is one thing, and polybutylene, but this is one of those things where a little bit of what's called is worth a pound of cure. A little bit of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so, this is where you lean into the inspector, lean in, see if you need the sewer scope, check it out.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to add to that. I highly recommend a septic system inspection. It's not usually, it's part of your home inspection, but I moved from Florida where everything is city water, everything goes straight into a pipe and you don't worry about it. We don't have systems or drainage fields. First house that we purchased here in Georgia, the septic tank itself was fine, but the drainage field was full. And so we ended up within a couple of months moving in, having put in all new plumbing for all new drainage field. And that is not cheap. And of course, we didn't know about it. We never, that was part of a home inspection that we never had to deal with in where we lived, And so it was one of those things where you're in a home, you're like, okay, we're moving in. And then it's $15,000. Oh, that's a pretty big pill to swallow. We had to do that. Like our first Georgia home, we learned the hard way on that one. We could have easily done inspection and everything else, and they could have said, hey, this could be refurbished or this needs that, which is something we paid to do while we were in there. But we just had this little puddle that would never go away. Like, why is this always this puddle in this one part of the yard? And I started digging, and the guy's like, dude, you dug up your whole drainage field? I was like, I don't know. And he's like, yeah, it's flooded. You need a new one. So good job.
So keep digging.
He offered me a job. He's like, wow, you can really dig. Tell you what, man, you want a job? I was like, nah, good. But yeah, so definitely do that. I recommend knowing what kind of sewer you have if you're on city water or if you're on septic. And if you're on septic, that peace of mind of getting that inspection is a big deal. We've been talking about plumbing, and we talked about leaky roofs, and I think both of those things will lead us right to number 5. The walls and in your home is going to lead to mold. Mold can be a big one. Some people are severely allergic to certain types of mold. We live in Georgia. We have a ton of mold here. It was a very wet state. If you look at our weather for the next week, it's going to rain every day.
We're very moist here.
Yeah. So, Lauren has a special ability. She can walk into a room and a home and know there's mold in the room. I'm pretty good at it, but
I just know the smells. I know the smells, right? Like I know the smell of a wet crawl space, a wet basement. And you're right, Jonathan. I can tell almost the second I walk in the door if there's a moisture issue, right? You don't have to see. Now, sometimes there's like a lack of circulation of air issue. Like I've gone into like a basement with a closet that the air hasn't circulated, and you can see a little mildew on the wall in like a basement. Is that a huge moisture problem, or is that just an airflow problem? You can decide. But for true water problems, you can typically smell them when you walk in the door.
Yeah.
And I'll just be really honest here. Houses were built different when they were building a lot of crawl spaces, maybe 50 years ago. They were not as worried if a little moisture got into the crawl space. Nowadays, we are super concerned about it. And so there's a very different level of awareness about how we're dealing with houses, how we deal with moisture, even how the airflow of a house goes, right? Our houses are much more sealed up than they ever used to be. We keep the windows closed. We keep the doors closed. We have more insulation. We have double pane, triple pane, quadruple pane windows. We do lots of things to seal our houses now. Whereas in previous generations, windows were open and things happened. So if there was moisture, it could escape more easily. But this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue as we tightly seal the houses, if you will. And so I think this is something that you just need to be really, really careful about, because it can get really expensive if you're not on top of it.
Yeah. In Georgia, they didn't sell basements as being waterproof, and they had to be water resistant. So there was never a perfect sealed basement here in Georgia according to code. So we've both had to do this I know you did it to a house you sold where you had to do the sump pump in the basement and then put the plastic on the walls. We did it at the house that I'm sitting in right now, because when we went to talk about it, like, yeah, this is normal. This is Georgia. That wasn't, we didn't seal these things to be waterproof. So now retroactively, because obviously our windows have been upgraded and the way we do things and have been upgraded and we're getting more and more airtight, we have to retroactively go back and do stuff to make less water come in. So that way if it's not here, then we're fine, But it's one of those things to take note. And that goes all the way back to foundation and structural. It goes to plumbing. It goes to things. Just keep the water out of the home. Mold's a big deal. Like I said, it can be life-threatening to certain people with allergies. But black mold's the big one. Some people can have black mold and live with it and never notice it, and then the next person can walk into that house and have a severe allergic reaction to it. So,
Yeah, and how much you're exposed to it and over time makes a big difference. Your age makes a big difference. Kids and older people are more susceptible. Anybody with lung issues. And so you need to figure out what's right for you. They do sell fairly inexpensive kits if you're interested in how mold is perceived at your house. You get these little tubes at Home Depot. It's quite comical, if you will. And it's a tube for air. And so you go to wherever you think the most mold is in your house, and you stand there for a minute, wave it around, put air in that tube. And then you go outside of your house and you wave it around for a second, close up the tube, and you mail it off. And what it does is it tells you this is the mold that is present outside. So this is the mold that is in your environment that you have no control over. That mold is there. And then this is the mold you have inside your home. What are the differences? And it'll describe it. There's so many different types of mold, and they're definitely experts on this. And so you can go through a range of a DIY fix all the way to probably hundreds of thousands of dollars fixed.
Yeah, the type of
right solution.
Location and size is going to have a huge effect on the cost of mold removal. It can be extremely expensive, or it can be, hey, you have a little bit above the shower, which is a real common place for it here in Georgia. Maybe start turning your fan on while you're taking a shower. And of course, then again, we have houses that are a little older, don't have fans in the bathrooms yet. They would open the window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think that, every house, and I would venture to say America, but I'm sure there's some dry, arid places that this would not, but anywhere in the Southeast, there's mold in every house. Mm-hmm. There just is. And so, you're never going to be 100% mold free, but you need to know when it's a red flag and when it's just a cleaning issue, essentially.
Yeah. So another one that's going to affect every house in Georgia. Number 6, termites or pest damage. I've dealt with termites, and when I lived in Florida, we had both ground and air termites. Ground ones are the aggressive ones that will destroy your home quick. The air ones, the ones that will swarm once a year, and your neighbor 3 doors over may have had it and never knew they had it, and they swarm, and now you have them, and they go right into your attic. The swarming ones are tougher to find. They literally will have a little pinhole in your ceiling, and one day you'll look down and it'll look like someone had poppy seeds on your counter. That's termites. You might find a little pile of wings by a windowsill when they try to swarm and they shed their wings by your window. The ground termites tend to leave a little dirt tunnel, and you'll see it going up the side of your foundation because they cannot leave. They need to stay in a moist environment, so they build this little mud tunnel up the side until they can get into the wood of the home. This is Georgia. This is the southeast. Underneath your feet right now, if you're in Georgia watching this video, there are termites there. That's what it is. So prevention is one of those things that if you can keep up with your termite bonds and your pest control, is the best way to stay on top of it.
And keep wood. So there's termites like heat, they like wet, and they like wood, specifically wood that is decaying, right? That's what they prefer, decaying wood over fresh wood. But if you have a wood pile away from your house, just keep it at least 10 feet or more away from your house. If you have shrubbery, just don't let it touch the house. Keep it away from the house, right? At least have enough space that you can walk in between the bush and your house. If you have trees, obviously you don't want them right beside your house, right? You want to keep them away. We have 2 different termite systems in Georgia. Typically, we have a bait system where you put these little things in the ground that essentially attract termites, which feels counterintuitive, but they come out and they check them quarterly. And if any termites have come to the bait station, then they know that the termites are in the area, and then they can aggressively treat it more. The other treatment for termites is they saturate the perimeter of your foundation with essentially a poison for termites. And that poison stays in the ground for, I think, 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, it's a long term. I think it's a 10-year bond or whatever.
Yeah, and so it's a pretty long time. Whatever kind of bond you have, I don't think one is better or worse, whatever is the right solution for you. But if you are in Georgia, you should have a termite bond because you never know when it's going to happen. And I actually have a horror story of one of my clients who was in a slab house, which we think of like basement houses being more susceptible because there's more ground to earth contact, if you will. And she had a slab, no basement, and there was a crack in the slab. So her termites were coming through the crack in the slab and eating the hardwood floors, not the 2x4s, which is typically what we think of, but the hardwood floors. And they had to seal it. They had to do all kinds of things. And it was a nightmare. She spent about 2 years getting rid of the termites because they put the flooring back down and then it would come back. And so it was really a tough experience for her. So keep your termite bond. Do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I had to tent our house in Florida. We had the swarm flying ones. And my brother is currently going through the exact same thing because Florida is just as bad as Georgia in terms of termites. You can do everything you want to the ground and then one will land in your attic. And, there's nothing you can do about it except for you can do the long-term prevention, or they do the tent where you've seen them. It looks like a carnival tent. They wrap the whole house. They evacuate for a few days and they fumigate the whole thing and they let it sit in there and then they air it out and you move back in. It sucks. Been there, done that. Yeah, but there's not much you can do about the swarming ones. I don't think there's a preventative thing. Good news is if they swarm and end up in your attic, they do so much less damage than the ones that are subterranean.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the swarming ones, but that sounds terrible, John. That sounds terrible. There's another thing that when I think about pests that also comes to play, this is where we also talk about mice, rats, raccoons, bats. I don't know what else.
Carpenter bees would be.
Snakes. What else can get into your house? And so we do have things called exclusion policies where they do seal the house, right? This is the difference of now and a long time ago. You can seal the house now, whereas before they wanted the house to breathe. Now they'll let you seal the house up. And so you have to be really careful. Bats are a protected species. If you ever get bats, good luck. Do everything you can to keep your bats away from your house. Keep your eaves clean. Keep debris away from your house. Because if you ever get bats, there's not a lot you can do for that protected species. If you have snakes ever, which I don't experience very often, but if you have snakes, you typically have another problem because they only come into your house if they're rodents.
Yeah.
So they only follow their food. So keep their food out of your house, and you won't typically have snakes. But just be careful and be aware. And we have a wildlife policy because we don't want wildlife in our house. And there's plenty of squirrels here in the South. We have a lot of bugs. I know that not everybody does. If you're in California, you're probably freaked out if you've ever seen a cockroach from Georgia or Florida.
Oh yeah.
They're big.
Yeah.
They're really big. We have our spiders. We have these giant spiders, and so there's just a lot of pests here. So be aware and figure it out. I don't know that. I mean, unless you're looking at an exclusion policy, I don't know that any of these are especially expensive unless you have a big problem. So this is once again a prevention thing. Make sure that it's prevented.
Yeah. All these are. This one here is if you do the little bit of prevention, will save you so much in the long run due to structural damage or something like that. Like keeping them out in the first place is fairly cheap. You can usually have someone come spray once a month, and it's like $50 or something like that. Whereas once they're in and they do the damage, it can get really pricey. And once something's infested, it doesn't have to be termite damage. Even if once you're infested, it makes it real hard to sell a home.
Yeah, and I think you were talking about carpenter bees a minute ago. The carpenter bees are a really great point. The pest company I've been using for a long, long time wasn't handling my carpenter bees, and I found a different company that could handle it. So I kept my long-term company for my termite, but I switched my pest control to a different company, and they got rid of my carpenter bees. I had them for years. I couldn't figure out how to get rid of them. They got rid of them, and not only that, every time a wasp nest starts to form, I call them and they come out and they get rid of it when it's this big compared to when it's really big. And so there's definitely some nice services, and just plan ahead and plan to get a service. You never know when you need it.
The next one is one we all have to deal with eventually, especially here in the South. HVAC systems, they're expensive, and when they go wrong, it's always when it's really hot, really cold. It never goes out in the spring when you can wait. That's the rules. They usually have, I'd say, about 25-year life, right? Guaranteed 10.
25 is a good estimate for HVAC, depending on where you live, right? If you're in Florida or somewhere hot, the AC is going to go out sooner. Here in Georgia, our furnaces last forever because we don't really tax them too much. So we had some people move here from Canada, and they were so upset that all the furnaces were so old because where they were moving from, it was so cold that without a furnace, you could potentially die.
Yeah.
And so that was, they thought about furnaces the way that we think about the AC part of the system, right? And so we are vigilant about our AC. We check the freon levels, we recharge it, we clean it, we do all the things for the AC. But they did it for the furnace. So when they saw the age of our furnaces, almost every house, they were so appalled by how, I think they called us lazy. We were down here for not changing it out. So it's interesting to see different areas, different things are important.
Yeah.
Granted, I've never lived in a cold place. I have no idea what's important there specifically, but I know that whatever you need to do, just check it, make sure it's good. They'll open up, your inspector will open up the housing of it and look at the coils and tell you if anything's wrong. If they tell you that you need to look into it deeper, just get somebody out there to double check it. I'm a big fan of service contracts. Mm-hmm. Typically, they're not too expensive, but they really help keep your unit in good repairs.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that, as they age, they tend to eat up more electricity. This one you're going to notice, especially on your electric bill. I'll tell you right now, the house we're currently in has an older AC, so we're getting to the time of year where my electric bill is over $300 a month because we do not have it's pulling hard. We know it's pulling hard, and we're getting to that point where we're hoping to make it till fall to replace it in the fall. But we'll pay the higher energy costs and everything else until it's time to go. But we know we're at that point, and eventually it's going to start to fail when you need it the most. That's how that works.
Well, and to that point, if you're having an inspection and it's the winter time, your inspector's not going to be able to check the AC because there has to be like a variable from the outside temperature to the inside temperature. And so if the air is cold outside, you can't really check the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Right? Just like if it's hot, you can't check the heat. There's a temperature variable. And so this is going to be a place where you may not be able to have all the information about it, right? The inspector can't just go hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, that you'll break the system if you do that. And so you need to be smart about it. And when we look at what an HVAC and an air conditioning can do, there's only about a 20-degree differential. Units can only do about 20 degrees different. Now, heat can be a little bit more, but when we look at air conditioning, it's only about 20 degrees different. So if it is 105 degrees outside your house, it may only cool to 85. And you're going to have to understand that is the limit of a system that works. Now, if you have all the lights off, you have the house sealed up, maybe the house will naturally stay a little bit cooler, and that's okay. But you need to realize that there's only a certain amount that the house will do. Now, once you get to about a 14-degree temperature differential, when it gets below 14 degrees, that's when you know you have a problem. So if it can't cool, so if it were 100 degrees outside and it couldn't get cooler than 90, that would tell you okay, that something's not working correctly. And then you need to investigate it further. But your inspector will help you a lot with that. You just want to make sure that you can. They'll check the temperature coming out of the air filter, and they'll check the temperature going into the returns. And that's where they get the temperature differential.
Also, the type of refrigerant used in your HVAC is important. Some of the older systems are much more expensive to recharge because we don't use I think it's R32 anymore.
We ran into that last year. We had to replace our whole AC system last year because our refrigerant was old and we had a leak. And so to repair the leak and then recharge it was going to cost half the price of the brand new system.
Yeah, exactly. So as refrigerants get phased out for basically the environmental damage that they do, some systems aren't worth replacing. The way to know that is know how old the AC is. It'll kind of help you tell what type of refrigerator is in there. They should be able to check for leaks on a system during an inspection. You may have to call a specialist for that, I believe.
I think you have to call. I mean, sometimes they'll have so the temperature differential, where the temperature that's going in the return and out, will tell you, it'll be the indicator.
Yeah.
And if it's not, if you can't get that 14-degree differential, then that's your indicator.
Yeah.
That something's wrong.
Yeah, and they'll also, when you have a specialist out, they'll be able to check the amperage that the outside motor is pulling. You go, hey, this thing's pulling a lot of amperage, it's getting ready to go. Having maintenance logs on that and knowing how old it is will help you a long way. Because if you may have an older system that's been up to date and had tons of maintenance done to it, it's going to last longer than one that's been neglected for the last 20 years. Because a lot of us get our AC put in, and then as long as it's working, we don't think about it. So there's not a lot of maintenance that gets done. So having someone that has good maintenance logs really looks good for a system, especially if you're on all of it.
And be ready to change out the filters once or twice, really very quickly when you first moved into a house. I know we've had the HVAC ducts cleaned before, and then changing the filters. A lot of times I recommend put in a new filter as soon as you move in, and then 30 to 45 days after that, change it again, and then get on the 6-month normal cycle.
Yeah. And then we'll go on number 8, which we kind of talked about 3 or 4 other times before, is water damage.
Yeah, well, the water damage is so important. This is the really thing that can really condemn a house, right? Everything else is very curable, but sometimes water damage can be big enough that it is not curable. And that's the difference. This HVAC will not condemn a house, but water can condemn a house.
Have an attic air handler, and it freezes over because you're low on refrigerant, and then it falls inside of your attic. It can cause water damage. Yeah. So, been there before too. Definitely had a few frozen AC systems over the years. But yeah, lots of things can cause water damage. We mentioned roofing. We've mentioned basements can let water in. Plumbing, if you've got plumbing issues, that something gets loose, or you're hanging that awesome new flat screen TV and you drill right into a water pipe. It happens.
Oh, your stub finder.
Yeah. Lots of things can cause water damage. Rain, your environment, where your house is built. Water destroys everything, and we especially know that right now because we also have the thing in Texas that just happened.
Yeah, prayers and thoughts and everything to everyone affected. That was big.
Yeah. We weren't going to talk about Texas, but yeah, It was not. I feel like it was preventable, but it is what it is.
So when I go look at a house, I want to make sure that the water is draining away from the house, right? I mean, with the house should be at a place where even if it's down a hill or it is where there's water coming towards the house, I want to make sure that the house has the right elevation so that the water drains away from it. If the house is in the lowest spot of the yard, there's probably a problem and you're going to have to deal with it for a long time. It's not something that'll just go away unless you redo the whole house. So think about it, my father in all his infinite wisdom used to say, don't buy a house in a hole. And it's true. Like you will have water damage. So thinking about what that looks like. Also just walking the perimeter, your house might be brick or frame or stucco or some other material that I don't know about. And there you could typically see where's the foundation, where's the pretty part, where does it, how does it look, where it has the ground eroded, is it stacking too high? If you are putting landscaping in and pine straw or mulch on top of it every 6 months, have you stacked up against your foundation? Pull that stuff away, see how it's looking, what does erosion look like, so that you can really control where the water's going, how it's going. One of the number one ways that I see water getting to a house, it's so simple. It's the downspouts of the gutters.
Oh yeah, make sure they go away from the foundation.
Yeah, nowadays you need to have those accordion ones and long and get them away from the house. If I see water coming into a house or a smelly basement, my first thought is, okay, how are the gutters? Where are the downspouts? What's it coming from? And we just had a situation where we bought a house in disrepair. We're planning to repair, and there was water, so much water in the basement. We thought, and we looked up at the house, no gutters. They were renovating or they put on a new roof, and they did not replace the gutters. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one is make sure you're aware of where your house sits. If you're buying on a floodplain or in a flood zone, you're going to have special insurance and stuff for that. That may or may not bother you. You can look at that creek and go, hey, it's never going to come this high. But if they say you're in a flood zone, there's a reason. And
they redrew our maps about 3 years ago because there was so much rain that places flooded that had never flooded before, and they redrew our maps here in Georgia a few years ago. And it's important to know that it's not if you feel like you want flood insurance. Your lender will require it.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that is 100% up to your lender. So one lender may require it and the next lender may not. So make sure that you know what is the requirement from your lender. That would be a time to talk to your loan officer, have them double check it, find that out on the front end, not the back end.
And if it's something you're really concerned about, you should also figure out what you're covered for from your insurance company. Because the last thing you want is to get flooded on say it was a freak storm and have no coverage. You want to make sure you're covered there, because if you're doing that kind of damage, repairs, without the help of insurance, it's hugely expensive. It's one of those things where basically all the drywall in the house has to come out if it floods that level. I used to go up to, and when I was a kid, little tangent, and we would go out to Mississippi after the flooding over there. We would rebuild homes as a kid, like a whole family church would do it. And so I've fixed that damage before and seen the devastation of that before. And it's amazing what water can do to a home when it's sitting in it for any amount. Because usually when it's flooding or to that level, it's not like you dry it out and you're back to normal. It is basically a rebuild. I mean, you don't have to take the studs out in most cases, but it's hugely expensive. So if you're in a flood zone, make sure you're insured. If you're concerned about it at all and you need a peace of mind, go ahead and get the insurance. But lots of other things can happen. Here in Georgia, we have major thunderstorms and stuff, and we get the occasional hurricane. You can get water damage in your home from windows breaking during a storm. If a tree comes down and hits your roof during a storm, lots of stuff can cause water damage. And it usually comes from some kind of nature, most of nature. You know what I mean? Obviously there can be man-made issues with it, but whether you...
Yeah, like a sump pump or something like that fails. In our basement, sometimes we have a pump to lift the sewage out, to get the sewage out, or even to prevent water. We do have water intrusion companies that you had touched on earlier. That if water comes into a basement, they actually create a channel for the water and then put in a sump pump to pump the water out of the basement. And so there are different ways to combat it. But yeah, it's dangerous no matter what.
Yeah.
You don't want water in your house. It's the fastest way to ruin a house.
Oh, yeah. So that's enough on water. Let's go to number 9. This one here is going to be age-based because a lot of the stuff we don't do anymore, but obviously we could always encounter new hazardous materials. But what I'm talking about specifically is asbestos, lead-based paint. A lot of that, like for instance, for us, lead-based paint was taken away in 1978. So if your home is built in that era or older, we obviously have disclosures and everything else that the buyer and the seller have to fill out for the purchase of the home. It's important to know. Obviously, you're not going to get that on newer builds. Asbestos, I don't know what the years are on asbestos.
Asbestos is a little bit more incognito, we'll just say.
Yeah, it
I
can.
will tell you that even some schools still to this day have asbestos in it because there's a lot of different uses for asbestos. It's not specifically outlawed in certain ways. And so it is still used in types of insulation, types of fiberglass. It is still used to this day in types of building. It's just more about what the hazard is. Some of those tiles, like if you think back, I mean, I think about my childhood and think about the same tile that was in my elementary school and in my church, in like every municipal center that had like that certain like look to it. That has asbestos to it. Also, those ceiling tiles, if you go into a house from like the 50s or the 60s, they had like some like 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 ceiling tiles. Those are asbestos. They're, and like I said,
for insulation on
yeah, insulation, plumbing. Yeah, there's different places where asbestos was okay. So typically there's it's an inhalation risk, like anything you breathe in. And so with lead, specifically, having lead-based paint in the house is not necessarily the hazard. It's sanding it and breathing it in. It's children eating it, which is apparently a thing.
paint chips as a kid. It was the best with dip.
Just chew on the windowsill. And really, it's something that we knew before 1978. Just like anything in our world, it's not phased out at one specific date. Like in this 1970, we told people like, hey, this is bad, stop using it. And builders, I don't know that this is the exact right date, but sometime around 1975, builders were not allowed to use it anymore. And then it was completely outlawed in 78. So it was a multi-phase system. But you don't know whose grandpa said,
And
you know what, lead is the only way to cover. White paint needs lead in it. You never know who had that opinion and who painted what at what time.
I met that grandpa.
Yeah,
I
we've all
painted a lot of white windows as a kid.
We've all met that person.
Yeah.
And we just know, right? We just know. And so that's why you have to be careful. But there's you can remove lead-based paint or you can encapsulate it. Encapsulate means painting over it. The worry is that if you sand it in the future, you then have the lead-based paint worry again.
I think they kind of the same rules with asbestos too. Encapsulating is how they get rid of it because removing it breaks it apart and puts it into the atmosphere. So a lot of people will encapsulate it. As long as it's in good condition or whatnot, it can generally be, it's okay. It's when it starts to flake up or chip, or that's when you start to have issues with asbestos. I guess other hazardous materials that we can throw in here is we should probably throw radon in here. Now that we're making houses more and more airtight, radon is from basically uranium decaying way down in the center of Earth, and it escapes through everywhere. It's everywhere. But what happens is it can get trapped in a really sealed up house. And so you can do a radon inspection. And it's generally really simple to fix because all you got to do is basically put an air vent in there and they move that air out. Basically a fan and a vent. That's how they fix it.
Yeah, and there's two different forms because typically the buildup is coming from the ground, right? Because it is a naturally occurring gas. It's odorless. It's colorless. You will not know that you have it. There's no indication that you have it, and so they actually form a vacuum, and so they'll break through the foundation and form a vacuum in order to suck the air out, and then it gets released up into the atmosphere, not down where you are. So it'll go all the way to your roof, and that's where the air is released instead of they don't just release it out at your foundation so it can just creep back in. Yeah. But it is naturally occurring, and we do have granite here in Georgia, and so that is a source of and so you have to know some places have it, some places don't. It's not a super expensive test, but it is really good. The machine is so interesting. I don't know. Have you ever seen a machine, Jonathan?
I've seen like diagrams of them. I've not seen one in person.
So the machine, it's not really big, but like every hour on the hour, it makes this funny little noise like it's slurping a straw, like, and it sucks in a little bit of air. It tests the air and it makes a mark, and it does it every hour. And you need it to go for 24 to 48 hours to get a really accurate. If it's raining, the humidity and the air pressure changes the radon reading. So if you are getting a radon reading and it's raining outside, your radon's going to be higher. Just naturally. And it's something that it's not something that if you get exposed to radon one time is dangerous. It's the long term being exposed to it like for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's long term exposure.
And this is something that's more of an issue on modern style of building homes than older style. Because older homes let's just call them drafty. And it's because of the air movement in a home, it wasn't building up in the homes. But now with new thermal codes and everything else, and everyone trying to make your HVAC run as efficiently as possible, with our triple pane glass windows and everything else, our houses are so much more airtight. And what happens is it can accumulate in the home. That's why we do it's basically an evac system to get it out. But testing is more important on a more modern home than it would be on an older home.
And even your even granite quartz, bringing that in, that can have the radon as part of it. So, and it's just natural, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to do that. Some people say new construction has a higher potential because they've disturbed the ground. Other people say, but new construction's been open. So if you're concerned about it, just get it tested. It's not super expensive.
Yeah, it's a cheap one. The next one, I think everyone has someone in their family that has committed these crimes. The DIY repairs, where someone says, I know how to build this. I'm going to build it myself. I'm going to save a ton of money. Don't worry about it. And if anyone's ever moved into a home where someone built the walls in the basement themselves, I think this is the most common one. I've seen it show in a million houses in the last year where they had a basement and somewhere along the line someone said, I'm going to make rooms out of this basement. And I've seen some atrocious wall builds, not using anything to code, anything to standard. And it's like, you go down there and you're like, well, it's cool that they did this, but this is all got to come out and be done right. And I think that's probably the number one place we see it here in Georgia, but it can be anywhere in the home.
Yeah, the only other thing I typically see that's like unpermitted is if they decide that they want to make the deck or the patio like a part of the house.
Oh,
and
that
is just not okay. Like, you need a contractor for that. That is, a patio pour is not the same as a foundation. It's not the same thing. It always gets wet and moldy and gross, and it doesn't matter what you do. So yeah, and you can kind of tell, like you said, like if it looks a little crazy, it's probably probably is. So, and that's important because, in some states they actually record all the things that have to happen to the house, and you have to prove it and show it. We don't have that in Georgia. You don't show permits and proof of it when you buy a house.
I will say I've been in this one personally. This is once again in Florida, where we bought a house. It didn't come up. And when we sold the house, they had converted the garage into a third bedroom. And so we lived in it for years with no issues. It didn't come up when we purchased the home. And then when we went to sell the home, they're like, hey, that wasn't permitted. The permits came up. They were never closed. They were never inspected. And it ended up costing money on the sale of the home because we didn't have a foot to stand on. We could either have them come in and cut holes in the wall to make sure everything's to code and to check the framing and the electrical and everything else and redo it, and it would have cost us time and money, or just lower the price of our home on the sale. And so we ended up lowering the price of our home on the sale, and they got themselves a deal because that permit came up on us. So it was, as far as we know, it was built correctly. It was done before we got into home. It never caused an issue for us, but except for the sale price. So instead of being a 3.2, it was a 2.2 with a converted garage. Not the same thing.
Yeah, funny how that happens. So I think that's I think that kind of wraps us up, right? Is that all of our? Yeah, I mean, get an inspection. That's the number one thing we can say. Get an inspection. I mean, unless you know a lot about homes and can hit all these items on your own, you probably need an inspector. They're going to run between $300 to $1,000. It's based on square footage. So the bigger house you buy, the more expensive it'll be.
Yeah.
But it's totally worth it. It takes the guy 2 to 3 hours to go through it. He gives you a nice report. Use an inspection company that your agent recommends. It makes a big difference to go have somebody who's professional, somebody who knows what they're doing, and can give you a nice printout of everything they told you. You don't need to be there for the inspection. You do need to be there at the end of the inspection, right? You don't need to follow the inspector around like a puppy dog the whole time. You'll actually make him miss things if you do. However, the last like 30 minutes of your inspection, he'll typically go over all the pictures and all the stuff in the house with you. And it's great to be there for that, because then he can say, hey, there's a spot on the wall on the ceiling. And you go, what? What? And you can go over and look at it at that moment. So like plan to give him his space so that he can do what he needs to do in the house, and then plan to be there so you can get all the information, because it makes a big difference.
And also being there at the end of the inspection, he can also tell you, hey, listen, I looked at this. I'm not 100% sure on this. I recommend getting someone on the roof to check this out. Or I recommend getting an electrician to see this because I ran into this downstairs and I saw this wire done by the homeowner. Another one for a DUIer. I wasn't sure on this, but I checked the plumbing and I would get someone to check this. You know, those little recommendations doesn't mean not to buy the home, but it might be like, hey, you know what, let's get someone in here, let's get peace of mind. Because that little peace of mind, go, hey, knowing what something's going to cost to repair. Because a specialist might come in, yeah, that's cool, but you got 2 or 3 years before you have to tackle this. You have X amount of time for the specialist to come in and go, hey, this needs to be done right now, and it's going to cost this amount of money. And that's when you go right to your agent, and your agent go, hey, listen, this is what we got from the inspection. Let's put this in. Let's renegotiate. You can have the seller fix it if it's that major. You know, I ran into that a couple months ago where we had the roof inspector come in and the guy said this roof needs replaced right now. And then they went straight to their insurance company and they had the roof repaired. They pulled it off the market, repaired the roof, and then went back on the market. They didn't know. They were living in a house. There was no leaks. There was no nothing. But in the inspection, it came up. And, you know, you never know what someone's going to do. But having stuff like that come up and getting handled kind of saves everybody. You know?
That's a great point, Jonathan. Don't villainize the seller, right? They may not have known there's a problem. Because we don't do inspections typically on our own house while we're living there. And so there may be something that they've lived with and that they've just been not aware of. So I just know that you can get there and talk to your agent, or if you're an agent, tell the story. Talk to the listing agent and say, hey, you know, we found this. We don't know if it's a red flag or not. We'd like to get another inspector in. Can we extend due diligence by
let them know.
2 days? Make them know. Tell them the story. Make them feel good. You know, we're not trying to cancel the contract. We're just trying to figure out, you know, trying to make sure that we understand, is it a big problem or is it not? Talk to them. Make sure you know, because this, for us in Georgia, our due diligence is all they've got for kicking the tires. So make sure that you've really gotten a chance to check it out.
Awesome. Well, everybody, we'll see you all next week. Have a good one.
All right. Bye, guys.